Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Game Master Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I'm going to be covering Chapter 2 of Fallout RPG. Chapter 2 focuses on combat, and this is Episode 3 in a series of videos that I am doing on Modiphius's Fallout role-playing game. So, without further ado, let me show some things that I just noticed today. So here we have the core rulebook. And what's great is that everything that you need is contained in one volume. Now there are other supplements as well that would be useful to have. But if this is all you have, this is all you need to both run and play Fallout RPG. Now, as I said, I'm going to focus on combat today. And what I noticed when I started flipping through the book and taking a look at what I was actually going to cover. So here is the section here. And I realized that at the very top here, there's a tab system. All right, so combat is tabbed here. And all throughout the chapter, you have this tab, and the tabs are visible if you can see, like you can make out the yellows and the greens and stuff. The tabs are easily accessible here as well. Now normally you would see these on this end of it, but it's still a nice thing to have so that you can quickly reference and realize, you know, this is the section that I'm looking for. I would probably take additional tabs like these little mini post-it tabs and put them at each of the beginning of each chapter. That way it's even faster to quickly reference the various chapters in the book. Now, of course, you can also use the PDF to do the same thing essentially, which I am going to be switching to now. So here we have the PDF, and I will expand the view of this as well. Let's see if you can read along. I will double check, and you should be able to see this well enough. If I cough from time to time, I apologize. This is day one of my testing positive of, you know, the very common thing you take home with you from vacations at, you know, very public places and such. I am currently on quarantine for the next 5 days at least, and I just have to text my wife because quarantined, we're kind of chatting across the house instead of in the same room, so it's a little bit hard to do. So anyway, let me respond to her really quickly. Okay, sorry about that delay, which you may or may not have noticed. So let's see. Like I said, quarantine is kind of a pain in the ass, but hopefully within 5 days, I'll test negative and can start sitting with the family again, both myself and my younger daughter. So let's see, combat encounters. Combat encounters involve characters attacking their opponent and defending themselves and their allies, and are more structured than free-form play. Instead of freely taking actions, the encounter is broken down into rounds, and during each round, each character takes a single turn. A round represents a short amount of time, a few seconds, up to a minute at most. That allows all characters present to complete their actions, and there are many rounds in a combat encounter as needed to resolve the conflict. You can attempt one minor action and one major action in each turn. A minor action represents something quick or supportive of your major action, like aiming or drawing a weapon, while a major action represents something that involves more concentration or effort, like attacking an opponent, defending yourself, or hacking a computer or picking a lock. Sequence of play, initiative. The character who initiates the combat takes a single turn before the first round. Initiative. Initiate combat, I'm sorry. Initiative. List all characters in order of their initiative statistics from highest to lowest. All right. So I'm looking at a character sheet now and seeing where that is listed. Okay. So let me switch views here so you can see. So here on the character sheet, you can see that this character has an initiative of 11. So this is a preset. This is a preset initiative that you'll have that raw score that determines who goes first in what round. So that's pretty interesting. If it's literally less dice rolling, that's even better. Take turns. Each character in order from highest initiative to lowest takes a turn. Begin new round. Once every character has taken a turn, the round is over, beginning a new round. Repeating steps 3 and 4 as many times as needed to resolve the conflict. Initiative. When combat begins, the player who initiated the combat takes a turn immediately. Once this is done, the game master ranks the combatants in order of the initiative statistic from highest to lowest, and the first round begins. In each round, the character with the highest initiative goes first, and then each character takes a turn in order of highest to lowest. All right. So if the character is a tie, the GM decides which character or creature goes first. Once the last character has completed their turn, the round ends, and the character with the highest initiative takes the first turn of the next round. Repeat the sequence until the conflict ends. All right, so yes, no dice rolling. So that's a streamline that is very, very much welcomed here. Now, this doesn't just involve like who goes first with combat actions. Like this might be who goes first with any kind of a major action. And so I kind of like that idea as well. So if you're doing something like trying to defuse a bomb, that's not a combat action. But the character with the highest initiative is going to have the ability to make that attempt to defuse the bomb first. So hopefully you're utilizing the person who's best at doing it, but sometimes players might compete with one another in that instance, and you might have someone that says, I'm going to try to, initiate this action, and so they go first regardless. Your character's initiative is equal to their perception plus their agility plus any bonuses from equipment or perks. A creature NPC's initiative equal to their body plus mind score. A character's NPC initiative is calculated the same as player characters, though some powerful NPCs add bonuses. Actions. All right, so I'm not going to go into too much detail in here because this is very, very commonplace, right? So there are minor actions, and I've already described them, right? So you get one minor action and one major action per turn. So minor actions are aiming, drawing a weapon, interacting with something, interacting with your equipment, let's say, taking off a backpack or dropping one weapon and picking up another. Movement is a minor action, and then taking a chemical. All right, so administering a dose of a chem that you are holding, targeting yourself or a willing character within your reach. So taking a chem is actually a minor action, which is actually very good. It's not like taking a healing potion in Dungeons and Dragons where that is your major action. Spending luck to act faster. You can spend luck points to interrupt the normal initiative order and take your turn earlier in the round. You must do this at the end of another character's turn, but before your turn in the initiative order. You cannot interrupt another player while it is their turn. Once you have taken your turn, you do not take another at your normal point in the initiative order until the next round. When you spend a luck point to take your turn earlier, you take your turn immediately. Can take one minor and one major action as normal, and you can spend action points to take additional actions as normal. You are still limited to the number of actions you can take in a round and can be interrupted by a ready action as normal. Prone. You may be knocked prone by attacks, hazards, or complications. You may also drop prone willingly at the end of any movement action you perform. Being prone has the following effects. When you are prone, you crawl. The movement action becomes a major action rather than a minor action, and you cannot take the sprint action. While you're prone, enemies at medium range or further add +1 to the difficulty of any attacks against you. While you're prone, enemies at a close range reduce the difficulty of their attacks, including melee attacks, by 1 to a minimum of 0. All right, so let me explain that to you. So when they say increase of difficulty by 1, it means that they need more than one success roll in order to hit you. So if they normally have to roll 2 successes to hit you at medium range because you're prone, they now need 3 successes to hit you. And then while you're prone, enemies at close range, and let's say they needed 2 successes to hit you, well, now they only need 1. All right, and if they only needed 1 success to hit you, now they automatically hit you. All right, unless they roll and fumble, right? Unless they roll a 20 and they fumble it. All right, so that's a pretty interesting mechanic that does play well in your favor for the most part. While you're prone, you can re-roll any cover damage die you have. All right, we haven't gotten to that point yet, so we'll see what that means. Major actions. Major actions when you can assist another character with their next test. You can attack, making either a melee or a ranged attack. You can command an NPC. If you have an allied NPC under your command, choose a single major action for them to take. If that action requires a test, then you automatically assist using your charisma plus speech if the NPC is a person, or charisma plus survival if the NPC is an animal, or intelligence plus science if the NPC is a robot. Defend. That's an interesting mechanic as well. All right, so I really like that being broken down into what you would use considering who you're commanding, and so that's pretty neat. Defend. You focus on protecting yourself, making an agility plus athletics test with a difficulty equal to your current defense. If you succeed, add +1 to your defense. For 2 AP, add an extra +1 to your defense. All right, so that's for 2 action points. We'll give you an additional defense. First aid. You can try to quickly patch the wounds of yourself or an ally. Make an intelligence check plus medicine test with a difficulty equal to the number of injuries the patient has. All right, so that's cool too. All right, so if they have multiple injuries, you're not just dealing with healing their overall wound condition, you're dealing with one wound at a time. All right, and the more wounds that exist, is the higher difficulty, the more successes you will need to heal up. And increase the difficulty by 1 if you are trying to perform first aid on yourself. If you succeed, you can either heal HP equal to your medicine rating, treat one injury the patient is suffering from, stabilize a dying patient. All right, so this is a really interesting mechanic. All right, and I can't wait to actually, check this out in actual live play and see how it works out and everything. But I really like the different layers of just first aid. So it's not just, oh, you kill, you cure 2 points of damage and move on from there. There's many things coming into play here that I really like. You can pass, choose not to do anything. All right, that's a major action. That's kind of weird, but you're giving up your action basically. You can rally. You grit your teeth, catch your breath, and prepare yourself. Make an endurance plus survival test with a difficulty of 0, which means you only fail on a natural roll of a 20, and save any action points you generate. The GM may allow you to add to use a different ATT plus skill for this action, depending on how you describe it, such as charisma plus speech, to inspire your allies. So rallying is like an action point generator. All right, so you're not actually doing anything during this round other than preparing yourself for your next action. And so, if you have a difficulty of 0, that means that any success on your die check is going to grant you action points, or automatically action points. So that's a pretty cool thing to do. You're kind of just psyching yourself up to do the next action. Ready. Describe a situation you expect to occur and choose a major action you will perform when it does. If that action occurs before the start of your next turn, you may perform the major action immediately, interrupting other characters' actions as necessary. So remember it mentioned readying up over here under initiative. Well, here is the actual rule and the actual major action of being ready. If more than one character has readied an action for the same situation, their readied actions occur in the initiative order. All right. Sprinting is movement action. You move up to 2 zones to anywhere within the long range. Remember, you're not moving increments of like 10 or whatever here. You're moving in zones, right? So from short or it usually goes short, close, medium, and long. We'll get to movement when we get there in a few minutes. Test, you perform a skill test for an action not covered by other actions with the Game Master's permission. So action points and combat encounters, you can buy D20s, as many as up to a total of 5 in your pool at a cost of 1 per die. You can obtain information with a 1 AP, and I've read this to you before. You can take additional minor actions for 1 AP. You can take an additional major action for 2 action points. And you can add extra damage up to a maximum of +3 additional damage dice, 1 action point per damage die rolled. Again, this doesn't mean that you're going to do an extra point of damage. It means that you're going to get an extra roll of damage. And I demonstrated that in the last video. Making an attack. Choose a weapon and target. Select one weapon you are currently wielding and then select a single character, creature, or object as the target. If you're using a melee weapon, the target must be visible to you and within your reach. If you're using a ranged weapon, the target must be visible to you. Choose hit location. You may choose to target a specific part of the target creature or character. This increases the difficulty of the attack by 1, which means that you need more than 1 success, a minimum of 2, in order to hit the target. Attempting a test. The test is determined by the type of weapon used. Melee weapon is to roll your STR plus melee weapons as your target. You need to roll below your target, and I've demonstrated that with the character sheet. I'll go through all of these. So ranged weapons, obviously you're going to have a few other factors that impact the number of successes they need based on the range. Thrown weapons, same thing. There will be a modified by range added to it. Unarmed, you're rolling your STR, your strength plus unarmed test, with a difficulty equal to your target's defense, right? So if your target has a defense of 2, let's say, then you're going to need at least 2 successes in order to hit them. Determining hit location, you can roll a d20. There is a d20 die that has hit location on them. Afflicting damage, roll a number of combat dice, which is represented by this icon listed by the weapon damage rating, plus any bonuses from derived statistics or from AP or ammo spent. Reduce the target's health points by the total number rolled. Resistance to target reduces the total damage inflicted by a damage resistance against the attack's damage type on the hit location hit. Characters and creatures have different DRs, damage resistance, for different types of damage: physical, energy, radiation, and poison. Reduce ammunition. If you made a ranged attack, remove 1 shot of ammunition plus any additional shots of ammunition spent on the attack. If you made a thrown weapon attack, remove the thrown weapon from your inventory. Hit locations, this is pretty self-explanatory. Creatures with other hit locations. So some creatures of the Wastelands may have other body parts like wings and claws and tails and such, and those are added in here as well. Ranged attacks within reach. Being in reach of an enemy is disruptive to ranged attacks and test, adding a +2 to their difficulty of any test that isn't a melee attack, which means that you would need 3 successes in order to hit with a ranged weapon against a character that is within reach. So here I was actually right with the ranges, right? So close, medium, long, and extreme for ranged weapons. Within reach is even closer than close. All right, that's a melee range distance. So weapon range difficulty, if you're using a weapon that is suitable for at close range, you have a 0 modifier. If a weapon has a medium range, then it is a +1. You need an additional to hit something that is close. Long range is a +2. Extreme is a +3, which means you would need 4 successes to use a weapon that normally has extreme range in order to hit a target that is in close. And they follow their perspective calculation along the way. So if you're extreme and your weapon is close to target range, then it becomes much, much harder to hit that target. Combat dice. So we'll just go and look at the combat dice and what they do. And I explained this in the last video as well. So a single pip looks like a bullet hole, does 1 point of damage. The 2 is 2 points of damage. The blank blank is obviously nothing, nothing. The 5, all right, which would normally be the 5, is a +1 damage, plus a damage effects trigger. And the 6th, the same thing, a damage 1 plus damage, and then damage effects trigger. The laser gun has a damage rating of 4 damage die, with the piercing 1 damage effect. When the sole survivor hits with their laser gun, the player rolls 4d combat dice and totals up the results. They roll a 1 point, a 1 point, a blank, and an icon, right? Afflicting 3 points of damage and ignoring 1 DR of the opponent's armor. That's the piercing effect. Sneak attacks. If the enemy is unaware of you before you attack, the difficulty to attack them is reduced by 1 to a minimum of 0. And your attack gains the vicious damage effect if it did not have it already. Or the damage is increased by +2 damage die if it already has the vicious damage effect. If the target to hit your opponent is 0, you need not roll to hit, but you may still decide to do so, generating action points and complication as normal. Increasing damage. You can increase damage, increase the number of combat die you roll to inflict damage with an attack by spending action points, as I've described, several times already. Random quantities. Combat dice are also used to randomly determine how many items you scavenge. That's an interesting thing. So I didn't know this. And so coming across this now, those are the dice used to determine how many items they've actually discovered. That's really cool. So that's a good use of the specialty die and utilizing them for different purposes. So I'm really surprised by that. That is a good mechanic to use. And like I said, it better utilizes the specialty die. Combat dice are also used to randomly determine how many items you scavenge. Where it is listed in the loot tables, roll the number of combat dice listed and add the result to the static amount listed. All right. There are 4 damage types in Fallout: physical, energy, radiation, and poison. All right, and those are pretty self-explanatory as well. Damage effects. So let's see. Damage effects augment how the damage you inflict to a target is applied. When you roll 1 or more icons, symbols in your combat dice pool, all the weapon's damage effects are triggered. Some damage effects are also based on the number of symbols appearing in the result as described in the entry. Each weapon is listed its damage effect immediately after the damage rating. So burst, the attack hits 1 additional target within close range of the primary target for each effected roll. Each additional target spends 1 additional unit of ammo from the weapon. Breaking, for each effect rolled, reduce the number of dice, damage die a target's cover provides by 1 permanently. If the target is not in cover, instead reduce the DR of the location struck by 1 according to the damage type of the weapon. Physical damage only reduces physical DR, for example. Persistent. If 1 or more effects are rolled, the target suffers the weapon's damage again at the end of their next and subsequent turns for a number of rounds equal to the number of effects rolled. Wow, that's pretty severe. All right, that's like a bleeding wound. All right. The target can spend major action to take a test to stop persistent damage early with a difficulty equal to the number of effects rolled and the attribute plus skill chosen by the GM. Some persistent weapons may inflict a different type of damage to the weapon. Only where this is the case, it will be noted in brackets, for example, persistent/poison. And that makes sense. Poison will not just affect you once, but multiple times. Piercing X, ignore X points of target DR for effect rolled, where X is the rating of the damage effect. Radioactive, for every effect rolled, the target also suffers 1 point of radiation damage. This radiation damage is totaled and applied separately after a character has suffered the normal damage from the attack. Spread, each affected roll, your attacks inflicts 1 additional hit on a target. The additional hit inflicts half the roll damage rounded down and hits random location, even if the specific location was targeted for the initial attack. Stun is if 1 or more effects are rolled, the target cannot take their normal actions on their next turn. A stun character or creature can still spend AP to take an additional action as normal. Vicious, the attack inflicts +1 damage for each effect rolled. So it's not a +1 damage die, it's a +1 damage. So there you have an initial, a +1 hit points of damage taken. Radiation damage. Radiation damage is applied differently than any other damage types. Each point of radiation damage after reduction for the location's radiation DR reduces the character's maximum health points rather than their current health points. If a character's health point maximum is reduced below their current health point total, then their current HP are reduced as well. Radiation damage is only reduced by the target's radiation damage resistance according to the location hit. If the radiation would affect the whole body, like an environmental effect, then use the character or creature's lowest location radiation DR. In all cases where a character would suffer radiation damage and another type of damage at the same time, resolve the radiation damage after any other types of damage. Breaking things. Inanimate objects can be damaged just like characters and creatures. Most of the time the GM handles damage to your surrounding as part of the description of the environment. Stray bullets, breaking glass, splintering wood, or ricocheting from steel, but there are times where breaking an object is the point rather than purely descriptive. Damaging an object works just the same as damaging a character. You're rolling your to hit. All weapon damages ratings subtract the damage bonus resistance, the object's damage resistance, and reduce its health. So an example here, if you're inflicting a critical hit on an object, you're inflicting 5 or more damage at once, you've broken it. All right, so damage and injuries. So critical hits and injuries. A critical hit occurs when a character suffers 5 or more damage in one hit after reductions from damage resistance. A critical hit imposes an injury on the character, which confers a penalty depending on the hit location. Arm, you drop any object held in that hand and the arm is broken or otherwise unusable to move. You cannot perform any action using that arm by itself or alongside your other arm. Leg, you immediately fall prone. As your leg gives out under your weight, you can no longer take the sprint action, and the move action is now a major action for you. Torso, you begin bleeding heavily. At the end of each of your subsequent turns, you suffer 2 damage die, physical damage, ignoring all your damage resistances. Head, You're momentarily dazed and lose your normal actions in your next turn, though you may spend AP for extra actions as normal. Further, you cannot see clearly and increases the difficulty of tests which rely on vision by +2. These effects last until the injury has received medical attention. Dying. When your character is reduced to 0 hit points, they suffer an injury to the location struck and then fall prone and start dying. If they suffer a critical hit and are reduced to 0, they suffer 2 injuries, one for the critical hit and one for being reduced to 0 hit points. While they are dying, they are unconscious, cannot recover HP from the first aid action, and cannot take any action. Furthermore, at the start of each of your turns while they're dying, you must attempt an endurance plus survival test with a difficulty equal to the number of injuries they have and a complication range of 19 to 20. If you pass the test, they remain alive but are still dying. If you fail, you die. If you suffer any damage while dying, they immediately gain 1 additional injury in addition to any injury caused by the other critical hit. All right, so you could start incurring multiple injuries, like multiple arm injuries or leg injuries. You can only have 1 torso injury, but you can have additional torso injuries, let's say, that will increase an additional 2 points of suffer. It really depends on where these additional injuries fall, that it can become very, very lethal fast. Healing. When you have taken damage, and there are a number of ways that you can recover in the midst of combat, stim packs and first aid are the only ways to heal, but outside of combat, you have several options. The medicine and survival skills are the most useful skills for healing. Healing in combat, you can take a chem, you can apply first aid. Remember, unless you are unconscious and suffered critical hits and injuries, then the first aid will not work. All it will do is stabilize you from continuing to die. Healing health points equal to your medical rating. Treating 1 injury the patient is suffering from. Again, not going to bring them above 0 hit points, but it will heal an injury. It will stabilize them, and it will heal an injury, first aid. Stabilizing the dying. Using the first aid action, you can attempt to stabilize a dying character. This requires a intelligence plus medicine test with a difficulty equal to the number of injuries the patient has. Passing the test restores the character to 1 hit point, and they are no longer dying, and their player no longer has to attempt an endurance plus survival test to avoid death. The character remains unconscious and unable to take actions. All right, so again, the character still remains unconscious, all right, even with 1 hit point. If radiation damage has reduced their maximum hit points to 0, they cannot be stabilized until the maximum health points are above 0 by healing the radiation damage. I'm getting some conflicting points here between what it said here, about first aid. While you're dying, they are unconscious, cannot recover HP from the first aid action, and cannot take any actions. But down here, it says first aid can bring them back to 1 hit point. Using first aid action, you can attempt to stabilize a dying character. This requires an intelligence plus medicine test with a difficulty equal to the number of injuries the patient has. Passing this test restores the character to 1 hit point, and they are no longer dying, and their player no longer has to attempt the endurance plus survival test. To avoid death, the character remains unconscious and unable to take actions. If they're back to 1 hit point, they're no longer unconscious, and it just cycles. So there's a difference here. There's a problem here with the two. I will have to inquire. There's a conflict between these two rules. Regaining health. You can use the first aid action to heal the character's health, passing an intelligence plus medicine test while will heal a number of HP equal to the rank of in the medicine skill, and an additional one for every AP spent. You can only heal AP of a stable character. All right. Maybe that's what it means. Like, first the character has to be stabilized before they can be healed with first aid. Again, there's somewhat of a conflict here. Treating an injury, I already read that. You use the healing ability to heal one injury at a time. Using stim packs. Stim packs are increasingly useful pieces of medical technology. With a take a chem minor action, you inject the stim pack and receive an instant result. Your character, for a willing patient, immediately recovers 4 HP or treats 1 injury. If the person injecting was dying, then they stabilized immediately. With the first aid major action, you may administer a stim pack as part of the action. The patient regains 4 HP immediately, in addition to any other effects, and any AP spent to heal additional hit points heals twice as much, 2 HP for AP spent rather than 1. Robots cannot be healed by stim packs. Okay. Healing robots is intelligence plus repair. Probably works very much the same way. Long-term recovery is outside of combat. Rest is the easiest way to recover from damage, although it is slow. If you can find somewhere to sleep for at least 6 hours, you regain all lost HP. If you're able to get 8 hours of sleep somewhere safe and comfortable, your own bed in a settlement you belong to, for example, then you are considered well rested as well, and a maximum HP is increased to by +2 until your next sleep. When you sleep, if you have any injuries, treated or otherwise, make an endurance plus survival test with a difficulty of 1. The complication range on this test increases by +1 for each injury that has not been treated. If you succeed, you may recover from one of those injuries plus an additional injury for every 2 AP spent. The difficulty of the test varies upon how active your character you were during the preceding day. All right, so the difficulty, if you were really heavy travel and combat, then the difficulty is going to be 4. It's going to be much harder for you to recover in that first day. Now, if you are restful for that first day, these additional days will become easier and easier for you to recover those points. Food and drink, proper nutrition. Food and drink. Are we still in the same section? Let's see if we're out of combat. No, we're still in the combat thing. So food and drink, proper nutrition and help wasteland, decent snack. Food and drink restores HP listed on their description. Food and drink cannot be consumed during combat. Some forms of food and drink are irradiated, especially if consumed raw. Roll a D damage die when consuming irradiated food and drink. If you roll an effect, you suffer radiation damage, ignoring any DR. Medical attention. You is for long-term medical care if needed. Environment. So we'll finally get to environment. In combat, knowing where everyone is can be vital. Fallout, the role-playing game, uses a system of zones to divide combat environments and measure movement and range quickly and easily. So distance range, so there is within reach, close, medium, long, and extreme, which I've already discussed. You have cover, that you can cover will provide additional damage resistance against physical and energy-based attacks. Cover type will be one combat die of cover type here. That reduces the number of combat die rolled against you when behind there. Difficult terrain and obstacles. This is a cost on your movement. So difficult terrain and obstacles examples: thick mud, loose sand, and upstairs. You can take 1 AP cost. Swamp, unable to or unstable rubble, 2 AP cost. Or steep slope, fast flowing water, 3 AP cost. So you can expend AP in order to circumvent some of these obstacles. You're using your strength plus athletics test in order to surmount them, but then it would cost additional AP if you failed to be successful. Environmental conditions, so poor lighting or darkness, or perception tests that will rely on vision, and all ranged attacks is increased by +1, +2, or +3, depending on the level of light. Mist and fog is a +1. Rain is a +1 or +2. And a rad storm, any creature not in shelter suffers 2d damage die radiation damage at the start of each turn. We have dangerous objects and hazards that cause different damage types, as you can see here. And dangerous objects examples like a frag mine, shotgun trap. Wow, a shotgun trap does 6 damage die plus the vicious physical damage, which means that for each of the icons, you'll gain an extra point of damage, not just an extra die roll, an extra point of damage on top of that. And there we have combat in a nutshell. So you can see I came across that one section that I found was a little bit confusing, but otherwise, I mean, there are many systems within this that I really do like. I like the different levels of it and such. So that was really, really interesting to see. And like I said, just that one thing with using first aid when a character is diminished. I think that after reading through it, if the character's dying, that first result, that first use of first aid will just get the character to +1 hit point and stop the, stabilize. And then you'd have to use additional in order to get the character back functioning again. At least that's how I kind of read it. But it's a little bit confusing, so that's something that I would definitely want to, open up the comment section if anybody has come across that situation and how they handled it. That would be perfect. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know this one is running a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I did cover the entire combat section in under an hour, so that's not too bad. So like I said, I like to try to keep these a little bit shorter, but I think it's important to cover the entire chapter in one go. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for stopping in. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing, and leave your comments in the comments section, and like and share and do all of those things that really do help the channel continue to grow and continue to appear on other people's watch lists and such. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen or at a convention sometime soon. You'll have a great rest of your day.